Join me, 48 Hours correspondent Erin Moriarty, on my podcast, My Life of Crime, as I take on true crime investigations like no other. This season, I'm looking into the labyrinth of crime and secrets within families. I'm cutting straight to the evidence and talking to the people directly involved, including investigators and the families of victims. Listen to My Life of Crime with Erin Moriarty wherever you get your podcasts.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
A note to listeners, the following podcast contains content that may not be suitable for all audiences.
We're walking along and this Honda Civic just drives by and quickly, I think that it was just a last second thought, but quickly veers to the right, stops the car and gets out and heads over to us. And this guy was, he was a big guy. He was creepy as I was with Roy, and he got right in my space, into my ear, and he started saying all of these, one of the things I remember he said, he told me that my nylons were giving him a hard-on. And I've been approached by creepy men at that point in my life, but there was something so terrifying about him that I picked up. I mean, I was scared to death. I started screaming at the top of my voice because I couldn't get Cindy to come back, and I just started screaming, "Get the F away from me! Get away from me!" And I kept yelling that at the top. I wouldn't walk any further, and I just started screaming my head off. And he realized that, he was going to be seen because it was, broad daylight. It was across from the motel that they were staying at. We didn't know that. And I think he was afraid he was going to bring attention to the situation, and especially so close to where they were.
You are listening to Partners in True Crime. We are your hosts, Rob and Cindy Dorfman. If you've been enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcasts.
Follow us on social media, subscribe to our website, and please leave us a review, even if it's one word. It's the only way to spread the word about Laura's work, and that's why it's so important.
When the Toolbox Killers were hunting for victims in Southern California, they were living in plain sight. Neither one of them looked like a psychotic killer. In fact, Bittaker was small and unassuming, and Norris looked like an average guy.
How many times have you met someone and your spidey sense goes off that something's wrong? Sometimes we brush it off, but sometimes our instincts are so loud that we can't ignore them.
Everyone is born with a sixth sense to protect themselves against danger, which is why it's so important to trust your gut. It's there for a reason, even if you don't understand why you reacted the way you did to someone until years later, which is what happened to our two guests today.
In 1979, 16-year-old Cindy and 17-year-old Gina were best friends living in Burbank, California. They did everything together, shared secrets, supported each other through tough times.
Cindy and Gina lived down the street from the Scott Motel, and every day they walked to school together, passing the Scott Motel.
What they didn't know was that the Toolbox Killers, Bittaker and Norris, were living at the Scott Motel stalking young women, trying to decide who was going to become their next victim.
38-year-old Bittaker and 31-year-old Norris would lure teenagers back to their motel room to party, promising them an endless supply of drugs and alcohol.
Cindy and Gina were spotted by Bittaker, who immediately went into hunting mode. The girls were not interested in partying with them and ignored their advances. But Bittaker and Norris did not give up. They spent weeks stalking the girls. Norris was even spotted lounging on the lawn of their high school.
Cindy and Gina had several run-ins with the Toolbox Killers, unaware how close they were to becoming victims, until they saw Laura on the Toolbox Killer documentary.
After 5 years of interviewing Bittaker and Norris, Laura has been looking for witnesses who can help her find more victims. Bittaker told her a story about some girls near Burbank High School, and those girls were Cindy and Gina.
Cindy and Gina were shocked to learn that the men who were harassing them as teenagers were actually two of the most sadistic killers in history.
Why were they spared? Was it fate, or did their intuition save them? Cindy and Gina are going to tell their chilling tale of how they managed to escape the toolbox killers.
Laura, why don't you do the introduction, since you have a little bit more information than we do, and just kind of introduce them both and by name and how they're connected to this case?
Yeah, I think, Cindy, it was you who initially reached out to me over Facebook. I think it was 2020.
Yes.
You had seen something I posted,
Yes.
and you told me about you and your friend Gina had some, run-ins with Bittaker and Norris up in Burbank. And we had tried to get on the phone a few times, but just we're always missing each other because of our busy lives. Now it's kind of at the perfect timing. We're doing the podcast, and I finally get to speak to both of you.
Great.
Great. So, Cindy, why don't you give us we'll start with you first, and give us a little bit of background on yourself and where you were and where you lived at that period of time when Bittaker and Norris were on their killing spree. And just give us a little bit of background about yourself and where you lived, and tell us your story.
Okay, so I grew up about a quarter mile from the Scott Motel, which, as you know, Bittaker was there. And Gina lived right across the street from me. And we lived near Lockheed, and it was a very, very industrial area. And so we had to walk kind of through an industrial area to get to school. So we would walk past the Scott Motel. And of course, we had no idea that there was any serial killer loose. It's just we had several situations where we kind of knew who this guy was, and we were creeped out by him, but we didn't know he was a serial killer until later, years later, when it was on the news and we saw pictures and we put it together and realized that we had come into contact with him a few times. So, yeah.
Can you describe when you did come into contact with him, what was it like, and did you have any kind of feeling about him?
He was very creepy, but the thing is, too, is that we were in high school, and so Lawrence Bittaker was the same age as our dad, so that was the first thing that kind of bothered us about him. But we would go to this liquor store like on Friday nights and stuff, and we were able to buy liquor because we were 16, 17 years old. So the liquor store was right behind Scott Motel. It's still there. Scott Motel is still there, and so is the liquor store. And so I had a big old Ford LTD, and so we pulled into the liquor store parking lot, and we pulled in facing towards what I'm pretty sure was the window where Lawrence Bittaker's room was in the motel. And so, it was a long time ago, but we saw him, but we were young. We didn't pay too much attention to it. We just kind of saw some guy over here, and I don't know, maybe he was looking out the window and then he came around to the parking lot, but I didn't really pay attention until we came out of the liquor store and he started throwing beer bottles at my car, and we saw him, and I saw his face and stuff, and we got really scared, but I didn't call the police or anything, we just, because we were doing something illegal. We were buying liquor illegally, so we just got hightailed it out of there. So that was like the first incident, and then Gina has a couple more that will be able to explain to you in a minute that were other run-ins that we have with him.
Okay.
As far as the Scott Motel, it was always kind of like degenerates hanging around there and creepy, but we had to walk past it, to get to school and come back. And we were the only two I ever saw that continued on our path where we would go home. One of the things I'm just so grateful for is that right past the Scott's Motel, we have to walk under the overpass. It's a tunnel.
Underpass, yeah.
Underpass. And it was a tunnel that if they had continued on, no one would have seen anything. And then we'd be, and then it's the industrial area, like Lockheed and so forth. Anyone until, they're all off, and then all these people come out. So it was like, it would have been the perfect place for them to have continued. And that's one of the reasons why I made such a scene when Roy came at me.
Oh, well, tell us what happened when Roy came at you. We don't know anything. So you can just walk us through everything that happened.
So Cindy and I, we were walking home from high school, Burbank High School, and we always walked on the the right side in the very beginning, which is across the street from the Scott Motel. But then we'd have to cross because under the tunnel, you could only be on the other side, the right side. Yeah, the left side. The right side didn't have like a sidewalk. So we'd walk to school on the sidewalk under the underpass on the same side as Scott Motel. But so we were on the right side and we were walking along. And I remember I had a dress on and nylons and high heels. And we were right near Der Wiener Schnitzel. And right before, you were going to need to pretty much cross the street. And from that point on, you would be like, nobody's going to see you or hear you. So we're walking along and this Honda Civic just like drives by and quickly, I think that it was just a last second thought, but quickly veers to the right, stops the car and gets out and heads over to us. And this guy was, he was a big guy. He was creepy as, he came up to me and Cindy thought it was funny. I think Cindy thought that, this guy's trying to pick Gina up, ha, ha, ha. And so she, started skipping in front of us, at a more of a distance. And I was with Roy and he got right in my face, like into my ear. And he started saying all of these, one of the things I remember he said, he told me that my nylons were giving him a hard on. And I've been approached by creepy men at that point in my life, but there was something so terrifying about him that I picked up. I was scared to death. And I yelled to my friend, Cindy, get back here, Cindy, because I really felt I was in imminent danger. And she was laughing and stuff. And I didn't want to she just thought, it was funny or something.
Well, you're teenagers. We have to clarify that. You guys were teenagers.
Yeah, we were teenagers. We just thought,
we were innocent. We were innocent little virgin girls. Very, we were so naive.
So naive. And
I would laugh.
Of course.
And so I knew that I needed to do something right there, or else he would see that we're going under the underpass or into the underpass cave or tunnel. I'm sorry. And so I started screaming at the top of my voice because I couldn't get Cindy to come back, and I just started screaming, "Get the F away from me! Get away from me!" And I kept yelling that at the top. I wouldn't walk any further, and I just started screaming my head off. And he realized that, he was going to be seen because it was, broad daylight. It was like across from the motel that they were staying at. We didn't know that. And I think he was afraid he was going to bring attention to the situation, and especially so close to where they were. So he got in his car and he sped off. And I was, anyway, it stuck with me for the rest of my life. But then
and when she told me after, I thought it was, I was probably treating it like a joke, like a dumb blonde that I am. But yeah, when she told me after, then it was creepy,
Well, you're a teenager, and how many men we've been hit on, and it's always like, get away from me. But if you had that visceral reaction to him, Gina, luckily.
We lived in Los Angeles, and so, there's a lot of crazy, people around there. But I think we had several, encounters. The next one, when I think about it, I wonder if they were coming back to, maybe he told Lawrence, and they got nervous about, me telling my mom and the police and everything, because it was the next time we saw them, Cindy and I lived right across the street from each other, and we were always at each other's house, like all the time. We were at Cindy's house and it was nighttime, and we were going over to my house, and this van pulls up. And it seems very odd that they would come down Brighton Street. We had this incident with them, and I didn't know it was who they were because it wasn't the Civic, Honda Civic. It was a van, and
silver or white van.
Lawrence was driving, and Roy, who was in the passenger seat, I couldn't see who was in the passenger seat, so I didn't become as alarmed as I would have. But it's odd that they were on our block at night to get to their motel or whatever they were doing. So they stopped the van, like directly in front of both of our houses. And we thought, we're 16 years old, like at that time, if you saw a lot of people at a house, you just went there. And even if you didn't know them because there was a party, it was that kind of climate. And so we were thinking like, oh, maybe, they're going to ask us a question where, how do you get here or there or what? And so we walked over to them in the van, and they were trying to like entice us and get a conversation going and wanted to party with us and so forth. And Cindy and I, my mom always said, don't get into a van, never talk to a man in a van. And so Cindy and I, when they didn't need directions and we saw that they were just trying to like, flirt or whatever, and we weren't interested, we just took off running to my house. And the thing of it is, we didn't run into my front door. We ran into the side gate through there because we thought, I don't want them to think, like maybe they won't know that we actually live, at that door area there. We were scared, and we ran, to the safety of our home, and they didn't, try to do anything else. They took off. But then I was walking to school this time without Cindy. I was nearing my high school, and I saw Roy, and he was sitting on the grass in front of the school. And I was thinking, what the hell is he doing there? Like, he's like too old to be hanging around. He's sitting right at the front of the school there on the grass. What is he doing? And I was so afraid that I didn't want to go to school. So I turned around and came back because I didn't want him to see me. I got really scared, like maybe he's looking for me or something.
It's terrifying.
And I want to interject real quick too, is that I don't know, since it was a long time ago, but I do not know how we figured out that van was Lawrence Bittaker's van, because we didn't know anything about serial killers at the time. But for some reason, then we knew that silver van was, or white or whatever it was parked in the Scott Motel Go ahead.
I think it was when they were on trial and it all came up about, the whole story. And then I recognized Roy's face. I could never forget that face and the things that he said to me. It was just, I just picked up this feeling from him that was so scary.
I remembered more of Lawrence Bittaker's face, but at the time, somehow her and I figured out that van that was driving down the street was in that Scott Motel. I don't know how. And then later years after I saw it on the news, then I go, oh my gosh, and then I tied it all together. That van came down our street. It was at Scott Motel facing the room that was behind the liquor store. And so that's how Gina and I started realizing that we had came into contact with Lawrence Bittaker and Roy, whatever, Norris, I think his name was.
Yeah. I wonder if they both were looking for us on Brighton Street, because it's so odd that they would be on that street at night, and we both lived there. And then Roy being at my high school. Now I know that they were targeting people from the high school, but I'd never seen him at the high school. And it was like right after, he had done this to me. So I started really getting nervous that this guy, is
stalking,
trying to find me.
Hey, Laura, can you just tell us a little bit about any conversations that you might have had with Bittaker in regards to young girls who got away, and how did you discover Gina and Cindy? I think you may said it in the beginning, but just if you can re-say it.
Yeah, well, there were so many stories they both told me of girls who had gotten away. They were actively hunting and stalking so many young girls. So if they had pulled up right on your street, they probably had been doing some type of surveillance on you guys. How else would they have learned? Yeah. You both had lived right there. And then they're also, coming to you en route to your school. And then you see Roy outside the high school. And there's a lot of reports from other girls I've talked to where Bittaker would be outside of their school. Norris would be outside of their school when they were coming out or going in, which is just like what you said, Gina, with him sitting on the grass there. It was like they were always waiting either when a girl was going into school or coming out of school. And that liquor store right next to the motel, that was their prime spot. They were watching for teenagers going in to buy liquor. They knew, especially on the weekends, like Friday and Saturday night, the teenagers would be going there and standing outside the liquor store. And that's when they would really pounce. Bittaker used to go up and say, I'll buy you some liquor. Why don't you come back to my motel room? We can have some drinks. I'll give you some grass, that kind of stuff. So I actually
I remember Cindy saying that they were yelling at us at the liquor store, at the car and stuff like that. And then they were trying to get us to party with them when they came on our block.
Do you remember the kind of stuff they were yelling at you at the liquor store? Or it was just Bittaker at that point?
I think it was Bittaker at the liquor store. I don't remember seeing Roy there. He could have been there, but I remembered Bittaker because I got a really good look of him, and it just stuck in my mind. And then later when I saw his picture, I was like, oh, I remember him. Gina remembers more Roy because he was in her ear, you know.
Well, and I remember Lawrence from the van, because we were both on the driver's side, you know, where he was. But again, if I had seen that was Roy next to him, and I don't know if, you know, I think Cindy, there was 2 guys in the van, weren't there?
Yes, and one had darker hair, which I assumed was Roy, and then Bittaker had more of a light colored hair. Is that right, Laura?
Roy lost his hair pretty quick, but he had, I would say it was almost the same. They were pretty similar back in 1979.
Okay. For some reason, I just remembered one of them was. I just remember when I saw, this is what it is, when I saw Lawrence Bittaker's face on the news, like a year later or whatever, that's when I was shocked. And I said, that is the guy that was throwing bottles out at us at the Scott Motel and yelling at us when we were going in the liquor store.
And you had called me, Cindy. You had called me because you were telling me about, you know, this tape that they had made of a girl that they had murdered, and that the mother had to listen to it in order to identify her daughter.
Oh, yeah.
We were just like, oh my God.
How did you feel when you heard that this person, you were in such close proximity to them, especially Gina? You thankfully listened to your instincts, is what we like to promote all the time on this show, is that you should always listen to your instincts. They're always right. You had such a visceral reaction to Norris because you intuitively knew something was wrong. But when you realized that what these 2 people were doing, how did you feel? It must have been terrifying.
It was absolutely terrifying. And, you know, it's not something that, you know, people want to hear, you know. And so like Cindy was the only one that I could talk to about it. And at that point, we were living in different states. I had joined the military and I was in Alaska. And so we didn't get to talk a whole lot about it. But when we'd get together and I'd come to visit, it was always brought up. And she was the only one that I could talk openly about it, because nobody wants to hear about that, or at least, you know, that's how I felt. And I didn't feel like I had anyone to share it with. And I can't believe I didn't tell my mom or my dad they were divorced, because it was a very abusive situation at home. And I didn't have parents to be able to tell that too.
And with my situation, I don't know why I didn't tell my parents. I probably could have told my parents, but I was really dizzy blonde at the time, and then I felt like, oh, if they said, what were you doing at the liquor store buying liquor? You know what I mean? So I just
right, exactly.
So I stayed in the area. I stayed in Burbank pretty much the rest of my life, near the Scott Motel. But once I found out, I really got scared, and I was working at the Glendale Galleria at the time. And then shortly after that, there was the Night Stalker, and he was at the Glendale Galleria. And so I think I didn't know it then, but like a PTSD, because I was so scared since I knew we had run-ins with Bittaker and Norris. And now there was Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, that was near Glendale. So I think it really affected me in my life. I think it affected me with relationships with men, because I was really afraid to even have relationships with men. I would never sleep with anybody. It was really hard for me to, and I don't know why, you know.
Remember, Cindy, it was also, we had the Hillside Strangler. It was like, it was right at that time when it seemed like there were so many serial killers within our midst. I would have to get walked to my car at night because of the Hillside Stranglers, you know, at my job. And it just like we were surrounded by that. You know, we grew up in an area at a time when it just seemed to be like everywhere.
Yeah. There was a lot of traffic in between that hotel and with other young people from your high school who used to hang out and party with them. Did anybody that you knew at high school have a similar experience who actually did hang out with them?
Well, we didn't, as far as I know, no one spoke to me about it. There could have been, and they just didn't think it was a big deal, but it wasn't I only went to Burbank for a short amount of time. I wasn't there the full time. And so my circle of friends was Cindy's circle of friends. No one brought up that they were doing that with them.
What about you, Cindy? Did you hear of anything or no?
I mean, at the time, we didn't really even know what we were dealing with. I probably thought this guy just wanted to pick up on, this weird guy wanted to pick up on Gina. I didn't have any idea what else he was doing. So, but I don't think I ever met anybody that said they had a run-in with them. And I told many people what had happened to us, but I never heard of anybody else. So,
Laura, was he stalking the Burbank High School or was it other high schools in that area?
Well, Burbank was predominantly the one that he stalked. There was also Verdugo in that area. That's where Lynette went to high school. They also, did you guys ever go to McCambridge Park?
Yes. We live right near McCambridge Park.
Yeah, that was one of the parks I know he hunted at with Roy. That's where they actually found Dina Moody. She was one of the teenagers. We had her on the podcast for episode 2, and that's where he had picked her up and pretended to be a model scout with Roy.
The motel was on the same street as our high school, San Fernando Boulevard.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
What was it? What was the name of
San Fernando Road, and then next street up was 3rd Street. So it was a block up, Burbank High School.
Oh, but so it was right there. It was right
close.
there.
Yeah, we'd actually sometimes walk through McCambridge Park, which was kind of near the Dewey Schnitzel that's now a Tommy Burger.
That's right.
We'd walk through McCambridge Park. You know what, Gina? Something just hit my mind right now. Do you remember when we would walk through McCambridge Park and some guy was trying to get us to smoke some angel dust? Do you think that could have been?
Yes.
Lawrence or Roy, because remember he was trying to get us to smoke angel dust in McCambridge Park. I'm wondering if that was him too.
Yeah, because I never had any friends that were smoking angel dust or anything like that, and I heard this is really bad stuff. You don't want to, and so it was really weird that if we did, it was definitely before I ever he approached me, because we just kind of like blew him off and just kept walking. But who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Actually found PCP in the motel when they did the search.
Oh my! It had to be because it was right around that time. But
it was all en route. It was all in our route walking home from high school. That's the route that.
And if you remember, Gina, when he said, "You want to smoke some angel dust?" We didn't even know what that was till after. I
had heard about it, but I didn't know what it did or anything. I just thought I had heard that like people get crazy or something.
So when you decided to reach out to Laura, why did you decide after all this time to reach out to her?
Well, it was me that did it, and it's because Gina, we don't live near each other, but we've always been in contact because she's been my best friend since I was 8, and so when we get together, sometimes we would bring it up and talk about it. We would get the chills just talking about what we went through. We didn't, but anyway, so then I saw Laura had posted about it, and I sent her a message, said, "Oh, my friend and I had some run-ins with the toolbox killer." So that's how this all came about.
I still when you say, how did it make you feel? There are times, I just get kind of stuck into it, and I think about, oh my God, that could have been us. Like, it
could have been.
It's so unbelievable that, we encountered them 4 times,
It's amazing that you guys are here, to be honest, after everything we've learned about these people and what they were doing and how they were so adamant. Once they got their eyes set on someone, they wouldn't give up.
Way more than you realize. If they knew right where to go, turn down your street, you were probably being watched way more than you have any idea.
It scares me so much, even to this day. I try not to dwell on it, but when I see the pictures of those girls, they look like us. We look like that. It's so scary to think that could have been us. Oh.
So I know that they had set out their sights on Gina. I know for sure. I at that time, I'm like, I after the we were running through the underpass when I was laughing because I was nervous or whatever. I kind of knew at that point, like, this person's after my friend Gina, and I'm pretty sure they probably were watching her, and then they saw her at Burbank High. I wasn't there.
I know that they had to know that we went to that school because, I mean, that's the time when people were, they knew the comings and goings of what time people went there, what time kids left there. And we were, so obviously that was our high school. That was our age, to be at high school. I'm just so grateful that I had that, intuition that just like was screaming, alarm in my head. Because I could feel from this man, like, just horrible things. Like, it was crazy. But I totally felt this man was evil.
That's why you have to listen to your intuition.
You were alone, Gina. When you were at the high school, I'm wondering if he had been watching you and was waiting for you to be alone. That day you saw him sitting out.
Now when I just started kind of putting things together, like, what was he doing on our block? What were they doing, and what was he doing, sitting there right after the incident, at our high school? And I saw him and I went, I'm running all the way back home. I didn't go to school that day because I was so scared.
Hey, Laura, can you just explain to us, based upon what they have told you, what Bittaker told you, if they had some gotaways, would they focus on them or would they abandon them? Or they would be more diligent on trying to find them and kill them? Or
would they just continue to stalk them just so they had an idea where they were?
Yeah, they would probably be waiting for a point where, they were separated, like I was just saying, just looking for the opportunity to get one of them or both of them. They wouldn't have stopped hunting, but they would have just been looking out and keeping tabs and just waiting for the perfect opportunity.
I think too, because he did it. He approached me so out in the open, Cindy and I, and it was so close to their home base across the street right there, that I think they thought we don't want her talking to anyone that's too close to home or something like that. And the fact that I was screaming my head off, they probably thought I was going to go home to a family that I could tell and that would be investigating, what was happening.
Screams actually could have excited them. They were anger excitation, sadistic personality disorder. So
he was all jacked up. Yeah. He was all jacked up, and like anxious, and it was just such a weird energy.
Well, luckily you listened to your intuition, and again, anyone who's listening, always trust your intuition. It is never wrong, and it will protect you in these kinds of situations.
I was just going to say, one of the things that I now have such curiosity in true crime. My husband had said, like, why do you watch this stuff? And I said, I'm just so curious about how the mind works. What is the mentality behind these behaviors? And so I've always, watched true crime documentaries after that because, and I've always been very scared, like, to be alone. I have PTSD now, and it's had its impact on me.
Absolutely. One of the reasons why women watch true crime shows or are interested in true crime is for that exact reason, to understand why people do these things so we can protect ourselves. We need to understand so we can mitigate them or try to figure out how to get away or what are the signs. That's what women do. That's why true crime is so popular. I don't think people realize that.
And I think too, also, is that it made me so much more aware and always thinking about what if. And, I'm always like, make sure you close all the shades at night so nobody can see in. I'm just like, double check everything. I'm super, super nervous about safety. And I think people who have been so close to such evil, they become a hypervigilant.
Absolutely.
See, and my
the world's
situation,
not so innocent. Yeah.
My situation's a little bit different because Gina she still is super, super cute. She had a beautiful figure. And I mean, I know she probably doesn't like me to be saying like this, but it's part of the story is that, and I was chubby, pimples or maybe, so they didn't really, I know that they didn't have interest in me, I could tell, and that's okay, that's just life, So I'd often thought when I found out about the toolbox killers after the fact, and Gina was in Alaska, I often had thought, good thing that she left because maybe would have been, they were really trying to get her.
Laura, what do you
go
think?
To Bass Lake after that, Gina?
I think after that I went to Bass Lake. Then I was moving everywhere. Just a very a lot
So
of
I feel like that
turmoil.
really saved her life, because I really feel like they really were intent on getting her.
Laura, from your experience talking to Bittaker, did he talk about this type of situation with girls that got away like this? Or like you were saying before, how you would continue to stalk them, but did he give any insight into his psychology about what he was doing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were a ton of accounts he told me about where, the girls ran off, which is what you guys described, running through that side gate, or they noticed a neighbor, peeking through the window and something scared them off. It's always like that one little thing that they knew it was like too risky to take a victim, and they would pull back. What's interesting, though, is the liquor store next door that you guys went to, and he was throwing the beer bottles and shouting profanities at both of you. Was there anything that was said beforehand, or any reason this type of aggression would have come out of him, in front of that liquor store?
I think his room was he was staying at a room that was toward the back of the motel and to the left of the motel if you were entering, which is right next to the liquor store.
But there's something that I remember about the room. We were facing his room, because later we saw that van parked towards that room, and
I think they were trying to get our attention,
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. I think he was trying to get your attention. He was trying to elicit a response, trying to engage you in any way he could.
And I was so oblivious at the time, but it just felt weird. It felt wrong. It didn't feel like a normal situation. There was something very off on it, very dark that we sensed.
Well, a wall of his motel room was facing Roy's liquor store right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it really was. It really was facing that. So
yeah, it was.
Okay.
Facing right there.
Because I often had thought, did I really see this or what, but.
No, yeah, it faced right out the back there. Yeah.
Okay.
I recently went to Burbank, and I actually went into Roy's liquor store, and ironically, the guy who was running it back in 1979 still owns it today.
Yeah, he does.
Oh my
He
gosh.
does.
Yeah.
Yep, I do know that. Yep.
And he told me all of his encounters with Bittaker. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Interesting.
Wow.
You just else in my mind right now that I had never even remembered, but I remember that was where we'd buy our alcohol. I remember going back in that liquor store and thinking, oh God, that's where that scary thing happened. And I remember whoever was at the register said, you girls be careful now. I do remember that. Somebody was saying, you guys be careful, but I think I thought, oh yeah, there was that weird guy that threw beer bottles,
Laura, that would be an interesting podcast with him, huh?
Yeah, we may have to go
I
find
asked him to come on.
Yeah.
Wait, Laura, what?
I haven't
The
listened
liquor
to
store
any
owner.
of this. I haven't listened to any of the podcasts yet, but I will. But I just kind of wanted to go from what I was remembering and not have it convolute what I read and mix it together. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Hey, Laura, I have a question for you. Did Bittaker ever talk to you about why he would do all this stuff in Norris so close to home? I mean, it seems really kind of odd that he was, he's shouting outside his window of his motel room across the street to the girls, trying to elicit response. Norris hanging out across the street from the Burbank High School. It just seems like they were really almost begging to get caught.
Well, pushing the limits for
Right.
sure.
Well, this was typical for Norris. As we talked to Kristen Messenger, he would hunt in his own backyard, 2 blocks away. He'd be on the pier. So that wasn't abnormal for Norris to be doing things like this, but for Bittaker, it was abnormal. He was much more careful. And then him, making a scene in front of that liquor store that he was always at and lived right next door to, and, pulling the van, up to your street so close by, that is abnormal behavior for Bittaker. But typically, if I ever saw this kind of behavior, it meant he was hunting the person pretty hard and that compulsion was taking over, because typically this was not normal for Bittaker. He was much more careful.
Were there ever at odds on their techniques on how to pick people up? Because it seems like Norris seemed to be a little bit more reckless than Bittaker and, them.
Much more.
Definitely.
Much more. I mean, their go-to was pulling up just what happened to you guys, saying, do you girls want to come party? Do you want to smoke some grass? Do you want to have a drink? That kind of stuff. They always went with that. And typically they were able to get a lot of girls into the van that way and over to the motel or to take pictures of them. But it sounds like they rolled up to you with the same ruse, do you want to come party, smoke some grass, have a drink, that kind of thing.
And I still think that, I would think that Lawrence would be upset with Roy for being so stupid about, just taking those chances. So, out in the open. And maybe he was trying to do some cleanup with us on the street at our home, to clean up the possibilities of going to bring him down. I don't know.
That's a very real possibility. I mean, that's what happened with Kristen, who we had on the podcast. I mean, Roy had attacked her and tried to rape her, and he told Bittaker, and he said, we got to clean up the mess they've seen in your face. So that is a big possibility as well.
I'll be curious to see what you guys think when you listen to some of the podcasts. I think this will be probably episode 10. We've done 9 recordings so far, but when you start hearing some of the testimony from some of the other people who got away, people who actually were basically being attacked and trying to be killed, it'll be interesting to see how it affects you guys.
Very much so, yes.
It is, because I really think maybe because it was around the same time that guy that was at McCambridge Park that was trying to get us to smoke angel dust, PCP, maybe.
And he was so much older than us too.
He was so much older, but see, the thing is, I think that must have been Roy, because if Bittaker walked past me, I would know who he is, but I never really could place Roy's face for some reason. I'll have to go look at maybe images of him on the internet, but I can still remember Bittaker's face to this day.
Yeah, he has a very, very specific look. He looks very much like a rat.
Yeah.
Very rodent-like.
Yeah. Well, you know what I was hoping too is I've listened to a couple of the podcasts that Laura had sent me to review, and that actually is what triggered my thoughts of oh my gosh, Brighton Street, what were they doing there? And then at the high school, and that's what really made me believe that they were looking to, they were hunting us down, actually, because there's just no way that, they were just, here he is here and there. 4 times.
Yeah, and also the Brighton Street where we lived, you know how we said we had to walk through a tunnel to get home because it wasn't an easy way to get there.
I know. I know exactly where it is.
There's no, they should have been on Brighton Street.
Yeah.
Well, there is reports of the night, Lynette was killed on Halloween night. Norris was coming, from South Bay to Burbank, and he had stopped because he was stalking a waitress. And he had stopped at a gas station too of another girl he was stalking. So it was almost like he was making his rounds even before he went to the motel to hook up with Bittaker. Mm-hmm. He had his own prey that he was hunting that he would stop in, in the Burbank area to check on.
Wow. It's just chilling.
It's terrifying.
I think more and more that might have been him at the park there, Cindy.
Yeah, I think so too. We just never.
That would have been the first time that we saw him. That would have been the first time.
That would have been the first time, exactly. Because when she brought up the Cambridge, and I'm like, there was that guy that was trying to get us to smoke angel dust at the Cambridge, and that was right around the same time. But it had to be the first time.
I totally forgot about that, Cindy. You're right.
Yeah,
so maybe that's 5 times. Jesus.
Yeah,
so
we're so lucky.
You guys are reliving it as we're talking right now. I can hear it.
Yeah, that happens when you start. That's why I'm anxious to listen to this podcast, because I'm thinking maybe more stuff will come out of my mind when I start hearing it.
Absolutely. Well, if something does come out, we can definitely have you back on again. I have a question for you. Cindy kind of alluded to this earlier. Once he was captured and the trial obviously was happening, were you aware of this other than just seeing it on the news? And did you tell anybody outside of you and Gina's little circle?
Yes, I did. First of all, I didn't even want to watch the trial because now there's a thing called PTSD, but I think at the time I probably did. I didn't even want to look at it. I didn't want to look at his face. So no, I didn't have a lot of attention to it. However, I told my mom, I told my dad, I told many people over the years that, when anybody it would ever came up, or if somebody said, "Hey, do you remember Lawrence Bittaker?" I'll go, "Oh yes, I do." Yeah.
What were your parents' reaction when you told them?
They both were just, "Oh, thank God." They were just. And then also at that same time, the Night Stalker or the Hillside Strangler, one of them was going on. So every time those came about, it was just so scary to me. And I'm still scared. Like, I don't watch any
have a lot of
horror
nightmares.
movies. I don't watch any horror movies. I won't watch any horror movies at all to this day. I went and saw The Entity, I think, a few years after this thing, and that was the only one. I never went again. And so I'm a scaredy cat now, and I think it's because of this. So.
Well, horror movies. I mean, yeah, you got to be careful what you put in your brain.
Yeah.
Those images pop up at different times. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I've just kind of like kept it in because, like I said, my husband would give me, like, if people started talking and stuff, and the time I would I really felt like I wanted to talk about it because it's so, like, I'm so lucky, and it's so odd to have that many encounters with them. But my husband would always say, "Don't talk about that. Don't talk about that."
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't.
I remember too that when I started seeing it on the news and knowing it was going on, and I knew, but I hadn't talked to Gina because she was in the military. She was in Alaska. But when we did talk, like, I kind of didn't really believe that all the stuff that we went through happened. I was asking her, did we do this? Because I just thought, did this really happen, or is this just a bad dream? So do you feel that way too, Gina? Like, were you like second guessing ourselves? Like, really, was that the same person? And
no, I knew that was Norris. I knew. I'll never forget him. God,
What's weird is you'll never forget Norris, and I didn't know who he was, but I knew Lawrence Bittaker was. It's weird.
Well, that interaction I had with him within my ear, and just that whole feeling that I picked up that I was in the midst of something very evil here. And he was so big and looming over you, right? And you could just tell that he was so cold and but he was all like excited, to see the reaction that what he was saying had on me.
Sounds about right,
Yeah.
Laura,
Mm-hmm.
huh?
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly what he did to Kristen, that reaction he was waiting for.
Yeah, he got off on it. The more that I got scared, the more that he said it. Like it was like a trigger for him, like he was getting off on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a horrible experience.
It's terrifying.
Laura, do you have any other specific questions you have for these ladies?
No, I'm just really thankful you guys, contacted me and wanted to come on and tell your story. I really appreciate it. I know it's not easy, and I'm really glad that you guys listen to your instincts, and I hope everybody listening really takes note of that, because, we do get those gut feelings and we have to follow them. We have them as our survival instincts.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. I mean, it's. I hope other people that have been through this, it'll trigger maybe something else like hearing their stories did with us.
Doesn't feel right, it's not right.
Exactly.
Trust your intuition always.
Fantastic, ladies. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. You guys have been wonderful, and here are your unfortunate stories, but I think it's always helpful to hear those. And our goal here is we're actually looking for remaining victims, their remains. Some other people that were not identified, we're also looking into that. So when you do listen to the podcast now, just anything comes up, just feel free to hit up Laura and say if anything jars your memory, because any and all information is welcome.
Well, where can we listen to this podcast?
This one will probably be on in, I would say, probably January.
Well,
we'll let you know.
Well, any of them. What's the name that we?
It's called Partners. It's Partners in True Crime.
Partners in True.
And it's the other title is Serial Killer Whisperer.
It's season 3.
Season 3. So if you go to our website, Partners in True Crime, there's 2 other seasons beforehand of other stuff that we did.
I can't wait to listen to them.
Crazy cold cases and other stuff, but this one is season 3, Serial Killer Whisperer, and you can listen to it. You can put it on your phone and you can listen to it, and you can subscribe to it, and then this way every time an episode drops, because we drop an episode every Friday.
Yeah, if you subscribe, it'll automatically
once again.
Thank you for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Next time on Partners in True Crime.
On this season of Partners in True Crime, The Serial Killer Whisperer, we will be following Laura Brand's incredible journey as she continues her groundbreaking study on serial killers.
Each week, we will release never-before-heard recordings of her conversations with the most notorious killers in hopes to get answers for the victims' families, and maybe that could lead to recovering their lost remains.
Please visit our website where you can subscribe to the podcast, find show notes, and check out extra content from all of our podcasts. All rights reserved. This has been a production of 722 Media Content.